All right, ladies. That's probably a good idea. Um, remember my comments last week, Brother Mitchell. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we now have a quorum. And I want to thank the members for getting here on time. For those of y'all who don't know me, my name's Alan Powell. I represent the 33rd District from Hart County. I represent Hart, Franklin, Madison County. Privileged to be the chairman of this committee. We went through all the glorious stuff last week of introduction, so we'll move forward to the committee. Last week I gave you a copy of the committee rules. You've had a week to digest them. Do we have a motion to adopt the committee rules? We have a motion. We have a second. Do we have any further discussion of the committee members on the rules to be adopted? If not, all in favor say aye. Opposed? The ayes clearly have it. One of the things that I had told the committee last week is one of the statutory duties of the House Regulated Industries Committee is that we are statutorily endowed to be the House Oversight Committee for the lottery. Since that's inception years ago, the lottery has certainly proven to be one of the most successful in the country, but they also have other duties other than lottery tickets. They are the depository for the COAM division, which is proving to be a pill in its own right. So we're going to have a discussion on that. What I've done for the scheduling today, I've invited Lynn Riley of the Georgia Student Finance Commission. I've had a lot of members that always ask the questions about money. There's uncertainty about shortfall reserve funds, how much there really is. And I've invited my good friend Lynn Riley, former House member, to come up and just briefly talk a little bit and to entertain questions. Now, on both presentations for the committee members, feel free to engage in questions. Everybody's got a right to be heard. The other members of the legislature who are invited today from the well of the House, y'all may want to learn about this because this is one of the most important state agencies that is the Lottery and Student Finance Commission is some of the most important we deal with, since we have basically built in an entitlement system of scholarships. If it wasn't for the lottery, the university system would just be a normal institution of government instead of as pork laden as they are, thanks to the lottery. So that being said, feel free to ask questions. For the committee, non-committee members that are members of the House, if you have questions as you hearing these presentations from Student Finance Commission, while I won't recognize you for questions, but if you want to text or hand a question to a committee member, then feel free to do so if you have a particular question that you'd like to get an answer to. That being said, Lynn, if you would, have at it.
Can we turn off the volume on that?
Do what?
Just press the volume up key.
All right. Go right ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me here today and giving me the opportunity to share with you some financial information as it regards to the generation, appropriation, and use of lottery dollars on behalf of students and children across the state of Georgia. Members, you will find in your folder two forms that I shared with the chairman for distribution to the committee. And I'll draw your attention to the first form, which is a chart which is headed the State of Georgia, Georgia Revenues and Reserves Report, Analysis of Reserve for Lottery for Education Preliminary. As at the end of each fiscal year, the State Accounting Office does a reconciliation of the dollars that have been provided to the agencies that utilize lottery dollars for distribution for the purpose for which they are received. The Department of Early Care and Learning for pre-K programs, and the Georgia Student Finance Commission for HOPE scholarship and grant programs. If you look at the most left column of data, you will see the beginning reserve for Lottery for Education on July 1st of 2018. And then you'll see columns going to the right for the fiscal years 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and 22. And in each column, you will see the beginning lottery reserve for education of each fiscal year, the additions, which are the lottery proceeds that are collected by the Georgia Lottery Corporation and sent to the state treasury, also interest earned on the lottery proceeds that are under management by the state treasury, and any remittances of unused lottery dollars in the prior fiscal year. And that totals up the amount of additions to the fund every fiscal year. Then deductions for any fiscal year are shown below, and that is the appropriations provided by the governor that are used for decal and student finance to distribute during that fiscal year. And of course, at the bottom of each column, you will see the ending reserve as of June 30. And then I would draw your attention to the bottom of the chart where it analyzes each year the reserves. State statute requires that the shortfall reserve of 50% of the prior year's proceeds be set aside as restricted. And unrestricted, a preliminary amount, is also reflected, totaling the total ending reserve in each fiscal year. If you look, for example, at, and we'll just go right over to fiscal year 2022. Lottery proceeds that year were $1.474 billion that went into the fund. We also, Treasury earned about $4.8 million on those monies that were held in reserve, and $70 million, almost $71 million, was returned by student finance or decal as unused appropriations in the prior year. You'll see that the appropriations in FY 2022 of $1.3 billion was set by the governor as part of his revenue estimate in developing the budget for FY 2022. And if you look at the bottom, where you look at the analysis of reserves, the total amount that was in reserve as of June 30, 2022, of just shy of $1.9 billion. Of that, $772 million, which is half of the 2021's lottery proceeds collected, is the restricted reserve. And unrestricted as of June 30, 2022, is $1.1 billion. Again, these reports are prepared in September by the State Accounting Office and provided and published in the Georgia Revenue and Reserves Report. I indicated also in this chart the source of these documents. You can go to the State Accounting Office's website to see the source documents where they do this analysis every year. And Mr. Chairman, on the second piece of paper that I provided to you, I just wanted to show that while the appropriations for the fiscal year ending June 2022, or FY22, were $1.3 billion, in amended FY23 that is before you now, the appropriations are a total of $1.4 billion. And for FY24, the upcoming fiscal year, the appropriations are $1.5 billion. A reflection of the increased use of the reserves that occurred at the end of fiscal year 2022. And I'm happy to answer any questions on this compilation of information that's provided each year by the State Accounting Office.
Thank you. Pretty impressive numbers. And these numbers that you have given, that we have almost 1.9, that was as of June 30th.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
So just a ballpark guesstimation, what would that be added to that right now, since we're already into almost February? Would you just, nothing specific, but we could probably be talking about maybe as much as another 100 million?
I would defer to President Corbin to be able to give some data on current year collections. Again, we won't see any of that at student finance until it's appropriated to us, but as I said, the governor's budget for FY24 indicates appropriations to decal and student finance totaling over $1.5 billion.
Very good. Number 24, who would that be?
Handsome young man. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, Ms. Riley. I noticed lottery proceeds collected in June 22. The collection seems to be down, a downtrend. Is that something that's part of a trend? Or how can we explain such a difference? Each year, 18, 19, 20, 21, we see an increase. 22, the latest year for which is accounted for, we see a decrease.
Thank you for that question, Representative Mitchell. I believe President Corbin is going to speak to how the pandemic made some anomalies in the playing of lottery games that generated a significant amount of additional revenue in fiscal year 2021.
Okay, so we'll ask her if that's a trend or just an anomaly. Let's look at, if I may, Mr. Chair, prior year agency lottery surplus return. Give me a circumstance so that I can understand why there would be proceeds returned.
Thank you for that question, Representative Mitchell. For example, if student finance was appropriated $400 million for Hope Scholarship awards in a fiscal year, and for whatever reason we only actually dispersed $350 million, then we would have $50 million of lottery dollars that did not go out of that $400 million appropriated to our agency. So that would be returned to State Treasury to be utilized and carry forward in balance for a subsequent fiscal year.
Is there such a phenomenon of winnings that were never claimed? Is there a line entry somewhere about winnings that were never claimed?
Representative Mitchell, that would be something that President Corbin can speak to on the accounting that's done prior to sending the proceeds over to Treasury for education uses.
Okay, and lastly, Mr. Chair, at 21, I see a dramatic decrease in lottery funds returned as opposed to all the other years. They're talking about under 40 million in 21, where the others are almost 80 million, 71 million. What is the reason for? Is that will be in President Corbin's report as well?
No, Representative Mitchell, I'm happy to report that we were a lot closer to our projections and our utilization in that fiscal year. So we were much closer than other years in knowing exactly how much our students would need to succeed.
Yeah, don't want to belabor the point. You know, one of the things that we don't have in Georgia is a need-based aid. And I see these are tremendous amounts of monies that are returned to the prior year agency lottery surplus return. I think that is more than adequate. That could be able to fund those who would not ordinarily afford to be able to go to school.
Representative Mitchell, I know that is before the members of the General Assembly to determine.
Thank you, Ms. Riley.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you, Representative. Does that mean you're not going to be meddling in other bills this year?
Can't promise that.
Number 29 down there, that would be Chairman Ridley.
Thank you. Is the reason for the surplus that's being returned is because back in '09, whenever we had the recession, people basically quit having kids. So now we're starting to see through all the colleges, with the exception of University of Georgia and Georgia Tech, that their students have declined. The number of students have declined every year. So would that not be because y'all worked prior year, like off the students that are coming in? The next year, if there's less students, then you would have more reserves to go back to the lottery. Is that not correct?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. Actually, we see continued growth in the utilization of the Hope Scholarship funds at Student Finance. I would defer to the Department of Early Care and Learning to speak about their patterns of utilization, because these numbers reflect both of our agencies' utilization. We've actually seen continued growth year over year in all of our HOPE programs. I think when we get we have surplus. It's just that we overestimate. We try to do our best to get as close as we can and be sure that we have sufficient dollars to pay every award that's presented to us by our post-secondary institutions. As I say, sometimes we get it a lot closer. Other times, for whatever reason, the awards aren't consistent with what we project.
Did y'all's projections, if I can, Mr. Chair, did y'all's projections go off the year before of people applying that has hope, or how do y'all get those projections, or do y'all just do a flat out percentage?
We look every month. We are tracking the awards that we are dispersing to our post-secondary institutions every month, and we use projections based on modeling of enrollment as well as population to try to target in as close as we can to what we think we would need in any given year. We can't predict whether a student is eligible or not. Based on the eligibility requirements, there may be some fluctuation that we can't project. However, as I said, our programs have grown in utilization year over year since the changes that were made subsequent to the Great Recession.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Mr. Collins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You may be able to answer this. You may not. Roughly how many people could we educate for $70 million?
I would have to go back and do some calculations, and we'll be happy to provide that to you. Again, because we have a variety of HOPE awards at different levels based on the specific program, we could give a ballpark, but I honestly couldn't, on the fly, give you a good estimate.
Okay. I'd kind of be curious to know how many people that would help.
Very good. And obviously, if this went to the technical schools, it could probably go a lot further to a lot of those programs, getting people ready to actually work. All right, no other questions from the committee? And I don't guess any of the committee got any text from any of the other House members that are in attendance today. So, Lynn, we really do appreciate you taking time to come.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's always a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Next up, President Corbin of the Lottery Commission. As a footnote to everybody, as y'all know, this is the Oversight Committee, and President Corbin has been very forthright in a lot of the dialogue about their operations for the benefit of the new members. She is our third president. Fourth president.
Yes, sir.
Well, I lost somebody in between. But you know, we have been very fortunate in Georgia to have an agency that has been so good about what they're doing, especially in a state that we have so many people that don't believe in gambling.
Thank you,
If
Mr.
would.
Chairman. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the invitation today, and I'll jump into my presentation, but before, if you're okay, I'll go ahead and ask those two questions that, or answer the two questions
Please.
that were asked. Representative Mitchell, you asked about fiscal year 21, and we'll look at those numbers. Fiscal 21 was definitely an anomaly with the pandemic. We were quite fortunate during that time period. I think that if we were to put our number, I always say this, and I probably should go do it so I can confirm it, but I think if we were to put our numbers of the Georgia Lottery up to Home Depot's, that we would see kind of a similar sales spike, because at that point in time, people had the ability to stay at home, redo their homes, do their lawns, and then they also had the opportunity to choose to play lottery when they maybe were not able to go to the movies or do other entertainment. I always say that I will be forever thankful for Governor Kemp for keeping our retailers open, because our players were able to go to retail, and then the work that we had done on our iLottery platform had the ability for Georgians to be able to play online if they weren't comfortable going out. And so it was definitely an anomaly. You'll see in our projections, Representative, that even though it was a great anomaly, and that it rose, when we take that year out and you look at how we have grown over the last 30 years, 10 years, we continue to increase in an appropriate manner. If you were to take that out, it would still be the same growth fashion that we work off for our projections. And then the second question was in regards to unclaimed prizes. We see about $30 to $40 million a year. Is that still accurate, Sherman? Okay. So 58 million in unclaimed prizes last year. As we sell more, you can imagine they're more unclaimed. We're excited again that our app has the ability for our customers to go and check those tickets. But those unclaimed prizes go directly back to education. They just go straight into the state treasury. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to be here and to join your committee today. It's always a privilege to be with you and also with President Riley. To our new committee members, my name is Gretchen Corbin. I'm the president and CEO of the Georgia Lottery. And as you know, the Georgia Lottery exists for only one reason, and that is to produce revenue, to provide back to the state of Georgia for the governor and you to allocate for educational purposes. On behalf of Governor Kemp and our entire board of directors, our educational partners, and on behalf of the millions of Hope and pre-K students who have benefited from your Georgia Lottery in the past 30 years, it's an honor to join you. I'm excited to provide information on what these 30 years have looked like and where we are going today. And to our new members, I know it's a given, but we love working with you. So any time that we can spend with you and talking about any detail of the Georgia Lottery, I'm always interested in doing so, as is our External Affairs Representative, Haley Allison. In front of you, you do have a packet, and that will include the PowerPoint presentation that I'll go through today. It also has our COAM rules and regulations to the right. And Mr. Chairman, some procedural changes that we have implemented as a result of former conversations with this committee. We appreciate y'all. We always want to be transparent. We want to answer any questions, and we appreciate your suggestions. We like the ability to implement those as we go. So moving on very quickly, the history of the lottery, as the chairman mentioned, it was created in November of 1992 by the people of Georgia to enhance education funding. The Georgia Lottery for Education Act created the Georgia Lottery Corporation to oversee and operate the lottery. And on June 29th, 1993, the Georgia Lottery began selling tickets. Mr. Chairman, you remember Governor Miller purchased that first ticket. Were you with him?
Yes.
So the two of y'all, did you purchase that ticket also?
And I also remember the winner of the first Georgia Lottery, who made the most astute pronunciation that thanks to God for his winning, he could buy a mobile home in Alabama. And that was when Zell really brought out that cranky look.
Well, we are about to celebrate 30 years of that, right? And so we're looking forward to celebrating with y'all these 30 years when we actually that hit June 29th of 2023. That's going to be our 30th year, so we're excited to be with you this year. We always want to make sure that we mention the fact, and y'all know this is basic, but it's so important, that the Georgia Lottery doesn't receive appropriations, never has. And that day, I guess a couple of weeks and months before you bought that ticket, Mr. Chairman, our first board of directors literally went to the bank to secure a $15 million loan. We paid it off in our second, within 2 weeks, and we have not looked back. As you can imagine, we are looking forward to celebrating our 30th anniversary with you. Every day we have our eyes on creating the largest amount of revenue to send straight to you to provide for education. As you know, Governor Kemp and you as members of the General Assembly appropriate those lottery funds annually. And our colleagues at Georgia Student Finance, President Riley, and Commissioner Jacobs at the Department of Early Care and Learning allocate those dollars that are appropriated. Our team is made up of approximately 370 employees throughout Georgia. We have our Georgia Lottery headquarters here in Atlanta, and we have 7 district offices. Mr. Ridley, I think we have one in your area. And I have members of our senior team today. I'm going to start from the far side, Mr. John Heinen, who is our Senior VP of COAM, Mr. J.B. Landrosh, who is our Senior VP of Corporate Affairs, Mr. Frank Taylor, who is our Senior VP of Sales, Ms. Sharman Lawrence, who is the most important lady in the room, our Senior VP of Finance, and Mr. Daniel Johnson, our Chief Technology Officer, You all know Haley and Mr. Joe Kim, who is our general counsel. So we have those members of our team, and again, many more throughout the state. Very quickly, our record, what we celebrate today in this 30th year, $26.1 billion for education since inception. In fiscal year 22, we returned $1.47 billion to the state, and that was our 7th consecutive year of over $1 billion. We have funded 2.1 million HOPE students and grant recipients, and 1.7 pre-K students. 1.7 million pre-K students. Mr. Chairman, these are our projections, and we have talked through the projections, but I wanted to make sure that this committee knows how we get to those projections and are comfortable with that. We utilize a CAGR, an aggregate growth rate, which figures over a 5 and 10-year period. We are conservative in our estimates. We would love to get to just the dollar before, or the exact dollar that you're going to spend. We don't ever want to be over one and disappoint y'all by any means. We normalize our projections for extraordinary events, representative such as the pandemic in fiscal year 21, and also the impact that we see in jackpots over the previous years. Those jackpots that are over in excess of $1 billion. And then we limit our projections to 3 years due to the vitality of the industry, new jackpots, and new games. Mr. Chairman, we are in the midst of our formal fiscal year 23 year-end forecast, and our initial forecast for the end of this year is $1.529 billion. And so, of course, that is an increase over the prior year's budget, and we are working to finalize that as we finish this half year, the rest of this fiscal year out. Two examples, we have we obviously know our sales from the past year. We look at those sales the last 3 years, the last 5 years, the last 10 years. But two big examples of items that we don't control but that we always look at, obviously, are, again, the jackpots and also the economy. Is the economy going up? Is it going down? How we think that will affect our customer spending. And we obviously get to those revenues numbers by selling product. And the product that we sell are scratchers, which are instant tickets. We have approximately 52 to 65 games each year out in our convenience stores. And we launch up to 4 to 6 games. Our draw product and also our iLottery product. When we look at our scratchers, as I mentioned, 52 to 65, this is where we could never, ever provide the revenues that we do to the state of Georgia if it were not for our retailers. We have sales team members in our kiosk, in our headquarters, in the airport, but our true salespeople are the clerks around the state of Georgia selling these scratcher tickets, and we are always appreciative to them. Again, 52 to 65 unique games. And we have monthly launches of 4 to 6 games, and our customers are watching those games, what new exciting games are coming out. Our draw games, I know that you are very familiar for this, and I know that we're all very excited about the Powerball that is up to $653 million as it rolled last night. So please send your friends and families out to purchase the Powerball for this week. But as you know, we offer traditional draw games like Mega and Power, which are part of multi-state consortiums. And as well, we offer Georgia-specific draw games like Fantasy 5, Cash 3, and our popular Cash Pop game. I think it is important to note that we have had an over $2 billion jackpot this year. That is record-breaking, world record-breaking, and that's something just to note. So we're seeing a lot of interest in our jackpots. And then our iLottery sales. Georgia Lottery was one of the first. Mr. Williams, Representative Williams, we talked a lot about this recently. Georgia Lottery was one of the first lotteries to begin selling iLottery products online, and we are now one of approximately 15 lotteries that either sell online or are trying to sell online. I have to tell you, to this legislature, I've never been so thankful as of March 14th when we had online sales. Between our retailers and online sales, that took us through those first tough weeks of the pandemic and just continued to take us in a stronger direction. Brick and mortar, we know, will always be our bread and butter, and we appreciate this opportunity with our iLottery channel to continue to increase our sales along with retail. We have found that every component of our portfolio is incredibly important, and iLottery is our fastest growing component. Our iLottery product, we have worked for years to slowly implement our iLottery product. We wanted to make sure that it would be a strong piece of the lottery in good partnership with our retail partners. And so we rolled it out slowly. And what we have found during that time is it has allowed us to increase our brand awareness and to be able to share kind of the love between iLottery and our retail. So we have the ability to engage, I hope with many of y'all, to engage with our players when they are part of our iLottery platform, to know about a promotion or an exciting sale at retail. And so we've enjoyed that. In regards to how large it is, Mr. Chairman, if we had been here 6 years ago, I would tell you that iLottery was, 0.5 to 1% of our returns. As of last year, it was 10% of our returns to the state of Georgia. And so I think that's why it's always really important to mention iLottery and to keep our eyes on it. We've increased 46% over the prior year. And so we know from a growth standpoint that it is one of our fastest growing pieces of our business. So it's been a win-win. It's been great for our bottom line, and it continues to enhance our brand awareness. I mentioned cross-promotion that we are doing with our retailers, and we look forward to doing many more cross-promotions and promotions in concert with our retailers. And this, I thought, was important to show you because it's a quick graph that goes from 50 million to 500 million, and you can see from 2013 to 22 how those numbers have grown. When we're returning 1.4 billion, 500 million is, we know what that is. It's a significant amount. So I wanted to make sure that we mention those two. As iLottery has been significant to the Georgia Lottery, so has COAM. COAM, I think everybody knows, but just in case, it is coin-operated amusement machines. House Bill 487 was signed into law April 10th, 2013, which transferred the responsibility for administration and enforcement relating to COAMs from the Department of Revenue to the Georgia Lottery. Our responsibilities include regulation, as you know, which is seen on this slide, which includes licensing, issuing of permits, and compliance. Our licensing number to date are 33,092 Class B COAMs in 6,100 locations. We have talked a lot about the gift card over the last couple of years, Mr. Chairman, and so I wanted to make sure that we provided an update today. You can see here that invitations to master licensees for the state to participate in the statewide pilot went out this past July. The total amount loaded to COAM gift cards to date is 12 million. You can see that the number of master license holders participating in the COAM gift card program is 83. The number of locations that are loading onto gift cards to date are 431. We know that we have another 600 plus in the pipeline, and the total amount loaded to these gift cards, again, $12.6 million, and the amount used by players from COAM gift cards for purchases now is over $11.5 million. Mr. Chairman, we don't know where those expenditures have been made, but I was excited that they have been made. And then, of course, the total number of COAM gift cards loaded, 52,792. Our COAM revenues and returns. This is a quick breakdown of those revenues and returns for the last 4 years. As we know, when we came into COAM, our revenue capped out at 10% in fiscal year 20. And so you can see that difference between 2019 and 20. And then any increase from 20 on has been due to the industry revenues as well as licenses and fees. But I think it is important that we note, when you look at 2019, from COAM, we were seeing $66 million to education, 2020, 91, 2021, 145. Representative Williams, COAM sees a lot similar play to the Georgia Lottery, and so it's all an increase also in fiscal year 21, and then in 22, another strong year with 141 million to education. And these are our recent returns, broken down with traditional and with COAM. It shows our traditional growth along with our COAM and our total growth, starting in fiscal year 14 of 945 million. We hit that magic billion number in fiscal year 16, and again have continued on for 7 straight years at $1.47 billion. And I would love to leave you with where we are and where we're going. We talk a lot about where we've been, and this is where we're going. We recently obviously wrapped up our QT results, and this is where we stand. In Q2 of this year, we had a quarterly transfer of $405.4 million. This was our second largest quarterly transfer in lottery history. We had record sales in October, November, and December, and thanks to the large jackpot. And our second quarter profit was $28.9 million higher than fiscal year 22. As mentioned, last fiscal year, in fiscal year 22, we returned $1.47 billion to the students of Georgia. So that brings us to 7 straight years of returns over $1 billion. Again, over 2.1 million Hope students and 1.7 million pre-K students benefiting. And as of this moment, we've provided or returned to the state of Georgia $26.1 billion to education. As I mentioned, we're in the midst of a great jackpot run. Grab your Powerball ticket, as well as others, please. And I just want to make sure that before, Mr. Chairman, I open up to your questions, that, as always, we remain focused on our mission. We come to work every day. And I can say, as a mother, as a good Georgian, as a former commissioner of the technical colleges, I have been so impressed with how this team comes to work every day with students on their mind and trying to figure out how do we do our best to make sure we're providing the greatest revenues to the state of Georgia. We appreciate working with this committee, want to always do so diligently. And we look forward to any conversation that we have today and elsewhere during the session. Look forward to being a resource.
Very good. Thank you, President Corbin. I see questions. I see Mr. Williams has been grinding it a bit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, President Corbin, for all that you do. And certainly you represented the state well at our National Council of Legislators from Gaming States in Las Vegas this past year, and we certainly demonstrated that Georgia leads the way in lotteries in America.
Yes.
Couple of things I noticed here, that 7 straight years returning over $1 billion to education. In a legislature that seems to have some reluctance, there does seem to be a great appetite for gaming in this state. Just thought I'd pass that on. It's growing. But I also wanted to thank you for these scratch-offs. I'm not a scratch-off. I'm not a gambler. Gonna buy one now because it's over $500 million. But I did wonder, could you move that word void off of these that you gave us?
It's not really fair to give out a ticket and then it says void on the back, right?
It just ain't fair. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr.
And to my good friend, you have to remember we have a gratuity clause in state government. And
He doesn't grateful there, boy.
these tickets that you referred to were for your information only and not for your personal profit. Let's see, number 17. Who would that be down there? Representative Bennett, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, President Corbin. I have a question to help refresh my memory
Absolutely.
regarding the gift cards. I know we spent a couple of years going back and forth about the gift cards. In, for example, a convenience store that has these games, instead of getting monies, they receive for their winnings gift cards. What can these gift cards be used for, and where can they be used?
So as a quick reminder to everyone, prior to the gift card, we had the ability, or COAM players had the ability to redeem only for in-store credit and also lottery products. This gift card allows a player to take that, to load their winnings onto a gift card, and they can use that gift card in-store, or they can take it and purchase anywhere else. We do have in our rules and our regs that alcohol, tobacco, and firearms are prohibited because that's in our statute. But that gift card is an open loop gift card that has the ability to be redeemed anywhere. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Further questions? Ms. Bennett?
No, thank you.
You're welcome. Number 25.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, President Corbin. A couple questions. One, trying to understand the iLottery a little bit more. I know you had a 10% return to the lottery with that. Can players play that out of state if you
No.
load it? So you can, if I was in Tennessee or Maine, you could play the Georgia iLottery?
No, sir, that's a very good question. Thank you for that. So, no, you're not allowed to go across state lines. And to play on the iLottery platform, whether the mobile app on your phone, I hope that you'll download the Georgia Lottery app. I can't play, but I have the ability to go and look and remind myself, what is Mega Millions at? What is Powerball at? If you play, you can check your ticket. You can only play. You can play there. You also have the ability to play online at galottery.com. And so you have to be a Georgian, and you have to when you're playing, you have to be inside the state lines. And so the system, when you are creating an account, there are two accounts to create. The first is like mine. I can't play the Georgia Lottery, but I can download the app and just kind of see what's going on. If you have an account with the Georgia Lottery, you have to provide some basic information. You have to provide your address so that we can see that you are Georgian, a driver's license number. You have to connect a bank account. And so that information, that information goes in. You can create an account. You have to be in the state lines when you play that account.
It's a location like a,
Geo-fenced.
okay. I mean, I'm not a carpetbagger. I was born in this state, nevertheless, so.
But it's a good question for many reasons.
Okay, good. My other question is I'm looking at the COAM, and I was looking at the 83 master licenses, is correct?
Yes.
Reading that correct? With the 83, what if they're bad actors? What if 3 of the 83 are bad actors? What happens with their licensing when someone doesn't play right?
So there are two times so that we look into that, and that's during the annual licensing that takes place, and then it's if all of a sudden that we find something out that something needs to be addressed, and we have attorneys in house, and they immediately let the COAM master licensee know there's an issue here, and then we have the ability to discuss that, and usually and to discuss that, go to a hearing officer. There's a process in place that conversation takes place
Has it happened before?
many times. Yes,
I'm
sir.
new to the committee, so I'm
No, many times. I mean, and our COAM team spends a lot of time, as the chairman and other members of the committee know, in working on those. So we know that there are really good actors out there, but when those bad actors come up, our job is to regulate and to enforce, and so we have to go do that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate what the lottery does for our kids. My 529 on my boy's about to run out soon, but they're not that smart, so they wouldn't.
I don't believe that.
But I do have a daughter, and there's hope.
Number 27, who would that be? Representative Jasper? Or
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ma'am, for being here. Just on I'm back to COAM, and the gift cards. With that, have we seen any, increase in play or return to lottery? Or, I did notice there was $1 million worth of unclaimed prizes that's listed here, but how has that affected play in those that have opted to a gift card?
Do you mean play of lottery products?
Yes, within a convenience store or wherever it might be.
I do not have data for you at this point. I can guess, but I do not have data for you at that point. I think it's a good question, something that we need to look at. When someone has the gift card, we aren't able to track where they purchase that. They could be going somewhere else and purchasing lottery product. But I don't know. We do know we do know that prior to a gift card, the only thing that could obviously be purchased is in-store credit or a lottery product. But to date, we have seen our numbers continue to grow as the gift card has been out there, and so we have not seen it be detrimental. But I think to answer that question, I would need to do a better study and get back to you with data.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, what I was thinking of is there a retailer on one side of the town that's with the master license doing gift cards and someone on the other end not? I just know if there was a difference. I know we talked about that in the last few years. Would there be if there weren't, in the effect of doing it?
Well, and I do think that we heard in the beginning, because it was kind of a condensed pilot, and we heard in the beginning that everybody wanted to be included, and so we expanded that to be a statewide pilot, and so we would welcome any and all of those locations to be a part of the COAM gift card pilot if they would like.
Okay, and that's lastly, Mr. Chairman, on the gift card, that $1 million that's out there unclaimed, is there a time limit on those? Like many of them I pick up,
There's not.
they're a year, there's not?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Maynard? Are you number 21? Oh, I'm sorry. Chairman Washburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back to the gift card thing. Now, that's still a pilot program only in certain locations.
Well, it is a pilot program, but we did open it up to any location or master in the state who would like to be involved. So it is pilot, but it is open, and we're still adding individuals to that program if they would like to be a part of it.
Thank you. Follow-up, Mr. Chairman. Is that progressing, that more and more master licensees are using or wanting to move to the gift card?
Yes, sir. I think the fact that we had 600 still in the pipeline is a good sign. We also heard early on that we heard early on from the masters that the financial responsibility was that some were comfortable with it and some were not, and so our COAM team worked with a third-party company to be that financing arm for those locations. So we made sure that every location who wanted to be a part of this pilot could be.
Another question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
Back to the COAM bad actors. So if somebody is a bad enough actor, I'm assuming that occasionally they lose the license.
Yes, sir.
What happens to that license then? How is it sold to a new licensee?
I could go through that process, but Joe, do you mind speaking to it? I think you can speak concise about it more than I can, probably. I think I would go on and on and on in answering that question.
When the lottery seeks a disciplinary action against a licensee, the the license can either come back to the state if the license is ultimately revoked, or the license, and this has happened in a number of cases, is there have been settlements, and the bad actor ends up selling their business and their licenses to another master licensee.
So when you take a license back, how is that sold to the new licensee?
Licenses that the lottery have are sold by way of a public auction.
Do you engage an auctioneering firm to handle that auction?
Yes.
Is that, do they operate under, I'm in the real estate business and I'm involved in some real estate auctions, and they use now auctioneering companies in the real estate business and in other auctions use a buyer's premium method where the buyer pays a percentage.
No.
You do not have a buyer's premium paid?
No.
How do you select the auction company that handles that auction?
pay
How do
the-
they get paid then? Do
we-
you pay them?
Yeah, we pay the auction company.
What do they get paid?
I don't have that. I can get that information for you.
How does the auctioneering firm, how is that selected? Is it put out for public submittal, public bid?
It's not required to. The auctioneering firm that we used was a firm that has previously conducted auctions for the State Department of Administrative Services, and so they had some good experience with them disposing of surplus property, and so we used that firm.
So it's not open for competition from competing
We certainly
firms?
could. We certainly could if we got some expressions of interest from other auction firms that wanted to serve as an auctioneer for master licenses.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. If I might ask Mr. Kim, General Counsel,
Yes, sir.
I noticed you made a comment that they're always auctioned off. Is that always the case when they, as I said, a bad actor, or if a master infringes in the rules and regulations? And we understand some of these rules and regulations are basically a death penalty for their license, that they basically are revoked.
When I was
So-
talking about auctioning of the licenses, I was talking about the lottery issuing licenses, not in the case of a master licensee who has settled.
All right, I think that's not what the gentleman had asked.
I'm sorry.
If a master has violated the law or the rules or the regulations as set forth, and the disposal of their property or that license, how are those auctioned, or are they allowed to be sold outright or transferred, or what is the process in that?
Those have all been done in the past by private sale, by the master licensee who's losing their license. They select who they're going to sell it to.
Private sale by order of the lottery or by that revoked licensee? Do they have the option to decide how they wish to sell?
It's a decision. The lottery has allowed the master licensee who's losing their license to decide who to sell it to.
No steerage involved?
When you say steerage,
Steerage would mean that that they may be given direction that you need to transfer this license to company X, Y, or Z,
not that I
not
know
on the
of.
market. And the reason I ask that question is that I've had other vendors and other masters who have said that they were ordered that there could be only one, where they had to transfer a license to a certain company, where they wanted to do an auction where they would brought in more proceeds for the value of their company.
I can't speak to certainly. I can't speak to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is getting pretty confusing, but I think maybe with enough discussions, maybe we can get it. As the general counsel, could you tell us a little bit about the organization of COAM? And as the general counsel, you have final say over, as general counsel for the lottery, you have the final say over all departments in any legal affairs, don't you?
No,
I beg your pardon?
No.
Let me turn this up for you. What I said is, as the general counsel of the lottery, you have total oversight of all the legal decisions made under the lottery, correct?
I'm not trying to be cute. Just depends on what you mean by legal decisions.
Legal decisions, you have the overview. You're general counsel. The COAM division, they make decisions. More particularly, one that was of a recent issue to me was where there was a consent order that was filed. You and I had this discussion with President Corbin. They gave me some concerns. And the concerns that I had at that time was there was a company that had been accused of major violations. And for the benefit of the committee, one of those had been owning retail locations. And then it got into the inducement issues of rules and regulations, which was basically the taboo, the death penalty for a COAM licensee, correct?
Correct.
And there was a decision that was made not to revoke the license, and then they would have had due process, but to do a non-renewal, if I understand, if that's correct. Is that correct?
Correct. This case came up during the annual renewal process, and so the lottery issued a proposed denial of the license for the upcoming year, and the licensee requested a hearing and challenged that
Correct.
decision.
And in our discussions, one of the things that I had a concern about was there had been a challenge. Notice was put on record by a law firm representing this company that said that I think the consent order basically allowed them to transfer their assets, because if I remember right, there was something to the tune of a $10 million penalty that was going to be assessed. Is that correct?
There was originally a tentative settlement where I think it was $10.5 million, and I ended up not allowing it.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think this is when I kind of need to step in as president and CEO, and you ask the question, does Joe have legal authority? In this instance, in COAM instances, as you know, John Heinen is our senior VP. We have a legal team that reports to John. And then in this instance, the hearing officer asked for the person with settlement authority. And I, as president and CEO, asked Joe Kim to have the settlement responsibility for this case. And so this was different than cases prior. And so he helped our COAM legal team during that case, but that has been different than the ones that you've seen in the last couple of years.
Then I'll go back to one of my original questions is, the COAM division has their own legal staff.
Yes, sir.
Does Joe Kim, as the lottery's chief legal officer, does he have authority to oversee what they're doing?
He does, and we all work together, but they do not report into Joe.
So he doesn't have or does have overview. Somebody's got to be, water runs downhill. Somebody's got to be able to make these legal decisions. In our discussions, if I may talk about our discussion, since it was between the three of us, I expressed my concern at that time about the threat of litigation, was that by signing a consent order, I think that it was going to destroy the ability of the COAM division to regulate people who have made or companies that have made infractions. Is that correct or
Yes,
not
sir.
correct? That is correct. So then if I might ask again, to legal counsel and to yourself, in that discussion, it was agreed that by signing this consent and not letting it go forward into due process into the courts, when y'all folded the cards, that also destroyed any future that y'all had about full regulatory authority over some of these bad actors. It basically set up a precedent. Is that am I correct when I'm saying that?
I think it did set a precedent in the denial stage. The hearing officer spoke to the denial, not the revocation. And so I think any pulling of the license revocations that we would see in the future, we would go through a revocation versus a denial.
So whose decision was it on this particular company, to do a non-renewal as opposed to the revocation? Whose decision would that have been? Was that Mr. Kim's, or was that the COAM division?
That would have been that would have been the regular procedure of the COAM division as we started that process of the denial, and so that it started as a denial of the relicensing process, and so that is how it started. And I don't want to try to speak any legalese, and we might ask Joe back up, but I think in the end of the day, the hearing officer stated he could not find where we had the ability, during that case at the end of the day, the team went forward to the hearing officer, tried to argue against the bad actor, to not settle the case. This was a case that had a large number of license, a large number of revenue. And so we felt going to the hearing officer was the best thing to do, so that the neutral hearing officer could provide guidance as to whether it should be sold or go to auction. And with that, I do think that we obviously were surprised at the hearing officer's take on what he said he did or did not see in the law. And Joe, I'll let you elaborate on that.
Going back to your question about who made the decision to either do this as a denial of, I think you used the term non-renewal or a revocation. Nobody decides, I'm going to do a non-renewal or I'm going to do a revocation. That's a function of the time frame. The licenses are issued 1 year at a time. When June 30th, 2022 came, there was nothing to revoke. The license had expired. The master licensee has to submit a new application. They submitted a new application. That's and that's for fiscal year 2023. That's why it was done as a denial. The hearing officer's decision was to. There were two elements to the hearing officer's decision, and I need to say they're really procedural decisions that he made. That, as you said, it had the effect of essentially gutting the regulatory authority of the Georgia Lottery, because it allows a bad actor to essentially monetize whatever the sanctionable behavior was, sell all their assets, and just and it doesn't matter what the lottery does once they sell all their assets. We never had a hearing on the actual merits of the case. The licensee in this case asked the hearing officer to authorize and direct the lottery to allow them to sell their location contracts to an existing master licensee, and they also asked the hearing officer to to direct the lottery to allow them to sell their other master licenses. This licensee had 7 licenses, and the hearing officer ultimately sided with the master licensee and said the lottery cannot stop the sale of the location contracts while this denial is pending, and the lottery cannot stop the sale of the other licenses, the master licenses themselves.
Thank you. That makes sense. Now keep your place. You've just prompted other questions that I've got. So it'd been customary practice for the COAM division to see no difference between a non-renewal and a revocation. Is that what you're saying?
That would certainly be that was the argument
I mean,
that I made.
and I understand that, to the point that legalese, the threat of litigation, basically forced y'all to fold your cards on this, and what you had said is y'all have lost regulatory authority because of this. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, my next question is, and I'm getting into past legislation for the members of this committee, of things that we've tried to change over there. Y'all aren't a member of the lottery, does not fall, the COAB division doesn't fall under the Administrative Procedures Act.
That's
Is that
correct.
correct?
Correct.
So basically, rules and regs that are promulgated by whatever division, they have no oversight from the rest of us insignificant folks of the legislature or any other thing. Is that correct?
It is not subject to the Administrative Procedures
Correct.
Act.
Thank
I
you.
won't agree that you're
So
insignificant.
my question at this point would be, in dealing with your administrative hearing officer that heard this didn't come from this judge that did the hearing officer, wasn't a member of a pool of judges. Is that correct?
Correct.
He's a judge or a hearing officer that's hired by the lottery,
That's correct.
which is also the equivalent of the prosecutor, the sheriff, hiring the prosecutor in a case. But yet he rules the other way, against the lottery, correct?
He certainly ruled against the lottery on this.
Y'all have how many hearing officers on staff?
We now have 3, but we have historically had just this one hearing officer.
And the other 2, have they heard cases, or is this just this one that continues to hear these
The
cases?
second one that we brought on a couple of months ago, he has started to hear cases.
The one that heard this case is the one that has been traditionally been doing all of your work?
Yes.
And this one hearing officer is being paid by the lottery, and he's not independent, even though they probably would think they are. Correct?
He is paid by the lottery.
Uh-huh. So you would think that this judge that made this decision, that several of the attorneys that I have talked to have said that they were actually shocked. Even some of the folks of working for many of the COABs have said they were shocked at that decision because it just basically opened the doors that a threat of a lawsuit or a threat of litigation basically would create no enforcement. That may not be a question, maybe a comment, but
I was certainly surprised by the decision.
all right. Let me refer to some of these others. I got to collect my thoughts for some questions, but I got some. Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I just wanted to make sure that the new members of the committee understand that hearing officer is not someone who is a neutral third party. That person is hired by the lottery and employed by the lottery to oversee those hearings. And you were gracious enough to take the committee to the lottery a couple of years ago. And one of the things that stuck out in my mind from that visit was, don't you have a simulated courtroom there? Is that correct? A hearing room, and while that looks like, in my opinion, I'm just a country undertaker by trade, I'm certainly not a lawyer, but in my opinion, I don't understand how in the world we've been able to get away with having the lottery employ the administrating hearing officer to go over those events and make a ruling when you hire the judge and you're also the prosecutor. That just is something that I don't understand how that's happened all these years, and I would certainly like to see that changed.
We're open to it. I will say, Mr. Chairman, it's in statute that we are to hire and contract with someone, but I think we've had these conversations multiple times.
A faulty law is what that is,
But we're open to any changes that, whether that's going to GOSA or whether it's expanding that pool. We're open to that. Also, Mr. Chairman, you've made a good point when we've talked, going to the chairman's comment about the hearing officer, the hearing room. Just a note that because of the pandemic, but even after, we have online hearings, and we allow for We allow for the actual COAM masters and licensees to decide if they want to be in person or if they would like to do it virtually. And we have about hearings, I would say about 90% are virtual now. But we are perfectly fine going anywhere and everywhere for these.
Very good. I'm more mesmerized at the idea that we have a hearing officer that is hired by the lottery. He's an employee of the lottery, basically, even though it's not created as employment.
Contract, yes, sir.
Contract. But yet, he rules in a way that basically guts the authority of the lottery to have enforcement over these folks who have, as Joe had said, obviously had violated certain requirements that were the main issues. And my question to that is, why would this guy do such a thing unless somebody had directed him to do this? Because I have had enough legal attorneys that have told me that he was wrong in this decision. Now, in our conversations, you know how irate I was that y'all signed that consent. I think that the truth in the case of any wrongdoing, that the truth stands before everything else, even before manipulative proceedings of attorneys, that the truth should stand. And if you violated the rules and regs, and that's what has created such a weakness in our system of enforcement right now and in other things that deal with this, the COAM division. Mr. Dale, Chairman Washburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there, these hearing officers, there are 3 now. That was formerly was only 1, but now
Yes,
we have
sir.
3.
Yes, sir.
What is the judicial background of these hearing officers? Are they attorneys? Are they retired
One is
judges, or what is their background?
Retired judge. One is, if you could speak to Judge Kill.
Retired Cobb County Superior Court judge.
Retired Superior Court judge, and then we have Judge Norman Fletcher, retired from the Supreme Court.
What do these hearing officers, what is their compensation?
$500 an hour.
$500 an hour
Yes, sir.
for work performed. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up to that question, how many cases has Judge Fletcher heard?
He hasn't heard any yet. He's just
The
signed
other
his
judge from
contract.
Cobb County, how many cases has he heard? Did he hear this case that we're talking about? So the one that heard the case is the one who's been on the number 1 hearing officer that's been on the payroll for the. And could you tell me how much his cumulative pay has been for the last year or 2?
I don't know, but we can absolutely go back and get that.
Would it be surprising that I have been told that he's been paid close to $1 million in 2 years of hearings? Would that be a shock? Could you find out
$500 an hour.
Could you find out a specific number for me?
Absolutely.
Let's see. Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner Corbin. Appreciate the testimony. I've just got a quick question. This unnamed bad actor, approximately how much money, revenue was that bad actor bringing back, delivering to the lottery? How much money was involved? Round numbers, you know.
Do you have a number? Okay. Can you, we'll get back to you. I apologize, I don't have it, but can you clarify that question? Or
So what I'm trying to say is how valuable was the revenue stream being provided back to how important was that revenue stream? Were they a big customer of the lottery? Was this bad actor delivering a lot of revenue to the lottery?
Absolutely, and I don't know that exact number, but I will get it back to you.
And a follow-up question, please, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is new discussion to me. When we have a bad actor, what penalties do they incur other than losing their license? Are there massive fines involved? I'll answer that.
There have been, and that's been part of if we go to a hearing officer and we receive what he or she, all of he's at this time, would provide, or also if we've settled. When we have settled, we have we have asked for a fine, or we have mandated a fine, and then we've also mandated that the individual not be a part of COAM.
So in that case, there'd be a fine, they lose their license.
Yes.
And do I understand, follow-up question, do I understand then that in some cases, a bad actor is able to monetize the value of that license, get all their money back?
It depends. Yes, they can. They can take a win. They can take a loss, because we don't necessarily know. We can guess sometimes, but we're not going to know what they are going to sell for, and we don't know, how much investment they have in, how much investment they don't have in. But that's a possibility.
Right. And just a final comment, with given the fact that a valuable license can be sold by the bad actor, that's almost an open door for bad practice, because the bottom line is they can make more money until they get caught, then they can sell and get all the money back. So there's really doesn't seem to me there to be much of a penalty involved for possible bad actors. That's something, in my personal opinion, needs to be cleaned up. But thank you for answering my questions.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you for your information, since I believe that Mr. Cameron said that this bad actor, or the suspected bad actor might be the better word, since it was not heard. The case wasn't heard. It was basically tossed out on signing a consent order. So they couldn't go after him to do whatever. But I believe it was said that he has 7 licenses, 7. And if I'm understanding the market value, that a COAM license today has a value of about $3.5 million per license. If that might help a little bit with what we're talking about. And how did this company accumulate, as other companies have numerous licenses? They would be buying these licenses to put the smaller folks out of business, so they become bigger and bigger and more politically important, for no better term. Would that be a correct statement, maybe? No.
It definitely could be.
You don't need to answer that question.
But it could be, Mr. Chairman.
You don't need to.
Thank you.
Number 24. Mr. Mitchell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. President Corbin, has the lottery ever appealed a decision? And number 2, part of that, in terms of the bad master selling their contracts and license, if the bad actor had been prevented from selling the contracts, would that have cleaned things up? And also, I have a question from Representative Ugly, who's watching from her office. What is the status of the original teacher scholarships?
I don't know about the teacher scholarships. I'll have to get back to you, if I may, or to Representative Ugly.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone know? We'll have to get back to those.
I'm sure Representative Hugley could call Lynn Riley direct and get that answer.
She heard your response, Mr. Chairman.
Joe, can you speak to the other?
But
Thank you for watching in, Representative.
But in as much as, have we appealed decisions, and had we prevented that in the first place, would that have solved our problem?
The lottery has never appealed an adverse decision to the lottery by the hearing officer.
Really? All right. Mr. Mitchell, any other questions?
Yeah. If we prevented them from selling the contracts or license in the first place, what effect would that have?
That goes to the point that Representative Williamson just made a few minutes ago about the problems with doing these settlements and allowing the bad actors to monetize their behavior by selling their location contracts and selling their licenses. If you don't settle, and in all disclosure, I'm the guy who opened the door to these settlements years ago. I was the first one who did a settlement because what we were seeing probably 4 or 5 years ago was that the master licensees, they would lose their license. It would not be renewed, it would be denied, or it would be revoked. The hearing officer would rule. They would seek to to have that decision reviewed in the Superior Court. And because they had appealed that decision, they're allowed to continue to operate and generate unlicensed revenue while it's working its way through the court system. When they lose at the Superior Court, then they seek to appeal it to the Court of Appeals. That, again, stops any action to shut down the business. So some of these licensees had been they had been operating without a license for years, just generating this unlicensed COAM revenue. The purpose of the settlement was to try to stop that, get them out of the business, and I think what happened at some point was that initial settlement amount became automatic, and so it was $1 million fine, whether they sold the business for $1.5 million or whether they sold the business for $20 million, and then so it started to become potentially a windfall, and that's when we started having some discussions about whether to revisit it. If you don't do the settlement and you just go to a revocation, actually the statute caps the penalty at a $50,000 fine. So in the case of a licensee that loses their license in the hearing process, then seeks a judicial review, that goes on for 3, 4, 5 years as it works its way through the Superior Court, the Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court. They're collecting revenue, and if the case ultimately comes out against them, then the most they're going to pay is a $50,000 fine. And actually, we have not had a case that actually went completely to fruition. All of the cases have settled.
Our board is just flashing like lightning bugs. I want to ask a question, and I want to get around to this. You said something a while ago that as the chief attorney, chief legal officer for the lottery, did I understand you to say that you do or don't have oversight into the COAM division? Did I understand you to say you do or you don't?
They don't report to me.
So they're an entity of their own?
Yes.
All right. And could you explain that in the corporate world, which is what y'all are, water runs down from the fountainhead. Somebody's got to be responsible. Could you tell me why you don't have oversight to the legal staff or to their decisions?
Mr. Chairman, I take that as my responsibility. I have Joe that does all of our legal. When we have these cases, they are being discussed. We are allowing the COAM team and the COAM legal team to work, and then if there's ever any guidance needed, then I am asking Joe to step in.
So basically what you're saying, there's no check and balance over what they're doing in that division.
I'm check and balance.
You have a legal degree?
No, sir.
All right. All right, let's see. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I must admit that as a relatively new member of this committee, I'm really getting a PhD today. But I was listening to Chairman Collins, and it just occurred to me, based on a statement you made and a question about some revenue and penalties. He's in a business where reputation is everything and punitive is swift. I'm a little confused because this seems like a business that's a win-win. I really win if I lose. And it's just, I'm a little confused about the oversight. And Mr. Kim, I heard you, and as an attorney, I'm still, and it'll come to me soon as we go further. But I'm really wondering about wolves watching the hens. It usually works to the wolves' benefit, and in this case, the hens don't even die. I'm concerned about that, Madam President. It just does not seem like when we have so many departments that I've watched cuts being made that hurt people's day-to-day lives. Then I see businesses that are multi-million-dollar businesses that really don't get the proverbial slap on the hand for being bad actors. And unfortunately, except for a little article, especially out in the rural areas, the people don't even know how bad the actors really are. And that's a big concern of mine, and I have yet to have seen one of them do one thing for the community I represent. I'm talking about these actors, bad or good. So they ain't big in the community, as I would know if they sent just one coat to some cold child for Christmas. When I see the millions that's being made, they ought to buy the whole house, much less the coat.
If you have a question, we're running at time, but
you open the door. You open this hen house now. So let us chase the ducks a little bit.
And I do appreciate that. All right, and thank you, Representative, and a good friend, and an astute representative. Let's move over on this side. Number 16, that would be the newest member, Shelley Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I am very new, so if you could indulge me just for a second. I am curious about the, you lose your license and then you auction it? Like, so I can go and buy a license, like on the courthouse steps, like a property?
No. The auction, we have in our statute that we are to auction a license at least within every 3 years. And so that is the auction that takes place. It's been when the Georgia Lottery has actually had an auctioneer and they come and they auction it, and you could go buy it at that point in time. I think the big question that we've been discussing is when we have these cases and when we have these issues, is it possible to have those license auctions versus sold to another company?
It's just.
Let me see if I can help clarify this.
Okay.
The lottery is authorized to sell a new license that's never been owned by anybody, and they do that by auction. Whoever buys that license then goes out and tries to find locations, and they build a book of clients. Yes, basically, in the real world, that's what we're talking about. What we're now speaking of is the licenses that are issued, the folks that have these licenses. And most of these companies are buying the license and the business from the smaller operators, so it's the big get bigger and the small are put out of business. Quite frankly, that's what it is. Now, I'd be remiss in trying to always give some historical perspective. It's not 83 masters. There's how many total master licenses, Mr. Heinen?
188, maybe
188 or 89 licenses. Now, I've dealt with this issue for years, from the time it was almost put out of business in the days of the video poker industry. But I've seen the legitimate families, family businesses that's been in the COAM business, the coin-operated pool tables, the jukeboxes, the Class A's and the Class B's. And I always remember, the bottom line is these are for amusement and non-cash redemption. The term of gambling is based on whether there's been cash paid, as opposed to things like what we used to know in the circuit of the fairs and the circuses of non-cash redemptions. And this is a growing business. But you have smaller operators, you have mid-size operators, but you also have huge conglomerates. You have some that are mega companies, and they've bought up these others. Now, one of the things I want to say to this committee is in the state of Georgia, licenses are usually treated as that certificate to do business, not as personal property. What's happened to these COAM masters, they're treated like taxi medallions, which quite frankly defies my logic that you can have a litany of these licenses. Then you make one mistake, well, you might have another one. Depends on how the enforcement comes out. So the bad players, and one of the reasons that I particularly have been so much onto this was knowing these people historically and having seen the history when there is lack of enforcement. The reason we have rules and regs such as a master can't own a retail location for the obvious reason that there could be some type of illegal behavior or inducements. This is a major issue because when you have this type of money that are being, even to the smaller guys, some of the bigger players would do whatever to try to steal their clientele by inducing them. And inducements are illegal. That is one of the taboo fines that you can lose your license on. So these are the things that have my concern. When I asked the question about the COAM division, about oversight, who has oversight? The president is running a corporation. I don't know that she has oversight over each individual division, quite honestly. When rules are made and they have their own legal staff, I believe, Mr. Hynum, and your legal staff is the one that decides the interpretation of infractions or even the new rules and regs or how they're to be enforced. That's what's giving me concern. If that helps you with your question.
And Mr. Chairman, I just respectfully want to say that all of those items that you mentioned, I have been in those conversations, and Joe is in those conversations. We do that as a team. We don't take your comments lightly, but I just don't want you to think we are in a vacuum by any means.
I understand.
Yes, sir.
And the reason I say that, and I feel terrible to chair this meeting, to have to ask Mr. Kim these. I only know Mr. Kim by reputation. I was told early on that he's a different kind of a duck. But I was also told that he is about as straight as he can be.
Absolutely.
To the point that I could see the difficulty in his answers today, which gives me a reason to want to extend this hearing some more. Ms. Bennett, see if I can get these lights off the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I've tried to get the light off the board. We've been going around and around regarding this COAM business for quite some time, and it seems as though when we settle or solve a problem, another larger problem comes up. For example, the non-cash revenue, limiting what could be purchased with the winnings and blah, blah, blah. Could you explain for some of our new people as well as to me what a bad actor is in the COAM industry?
I think that the chairman actually spoke to a couple of things, right? And that's in statute, rules, and regs, and I would need John or Joe to come up to go through all of them. But I think chairman provided some really good examples. In law, you are not allowed to own the real estate or own the location if you are a master licensee. You're not allowed to induce. So I'm not, as a master, allowed to give you money if you're a location. Are there some, like, what would y'all say are the top five? Top five offenses, John? Cash payouts.
If you're a location, you have to make more than 50% of your revenue has to come from what you sell in your store and not come from the machine. So that's a big inducements. There's straw ownership of stores. And then what Chairman Powell pointed out is a big issue of masters owning interest in locations and that blur of a line where I think the legislature wanted a very bright line between masters and owners. That's where we spend most of our times.
All right. Ms. Maynard?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, President, for the presentation. I'm going to wrap several questions up into one. So just for clarity, when the bad actor sells, since they have oversight over who they sell to, can the licensee sell to a family member, like a wife or a child or a parent or cousin? The follow-up questions to that are, if you guys are not a state agency but an instrumentality of the state, maybe legislative council can explain what instrumentality is, because I feel like if you are in any form of a state agency, that you would fall under the Administrative Procedures Act. I don't understand why the instrumentality of a state is not included in that. And then if you are able to just give maybe some ranges, because maybe it's not a finite number, but what are some of these initial purchase prices? And then what are the sale prices? And also, is there a limit on the number of licensees that one person can have? And then the last question is, when they do these bad actor things, are they breaking law? Is it a crime? And if it is a crime, is law enforcement involved? Does it become a felony? Because sometimes if you're a felon, you can't do certain things, and I would think selling a license would be one of those things.
That's correct. John, Joe, either? I know. John, most of those are COAM questions. Why don't you take those?
Probably need one at a time.
Yeah. Help me. Can you just go through one more time, like the first question?
Sorry.
Okay. So first question, can they sell, the bad actor, can they sell to a family member or close friend?
So when they're under revocation.
John, can you join us? Yeah.
So a quick answer to that question, short answer would be no. If you're a bad actor and you get caught doing something wrong, and as part of that settlement, we're going to allow you to sell that license, we ultimately have to approve that license. And so there is going to be an issue with the money still coming back to you. So we would not normally approve that license. It would be your short answer.
And so how would you know it won? Like if it was my parent and they had a different last name?
So they would have to apply, and we would do our database checks, and there would have to be questions that your parents would have to answer. And there is a specific question on the application: are you related to a past licensee or a current licensee?
And then another question was, when they are doing these bad actor things, are they violations of the law? So law enforcement is involved and it's a crime, and if it's a crime of a certain monetary amount, does that mean it's a felon, and how does that play into them being able to sell?
That's correct. So there are offenses that are criminal in nature. The GBI has a commercial gambling unit. They work that side. We are not law enforcement. Some federal agencies, tax agencies in particular, look at these crimes as well. But our goal, as Mr. Kim pointed out, it's a way, not the way. There are lots of a ways, right? Was to get the bad actor out. So if they're selling to someone, our hope is it's someone that's going to do the licensing activity properly. And so if that was a criminal offense, we want that person out. We let law enforcement do their thing, and that has happened. There has actually been a case where law enforcement prosecuted a licensee that got out of the business. So that's a whole nother channel that they go down. And so then a good actor, if we're going to use that terminology, would then take that business through a sale.
And so if they commit a crime and law enforcement investigates and say it's a felony, can they still sell?
That would still be an option. Usually the law enforcement action in your scenario would probably happen after we would do the licensing issue. So again, our hope is that license goes to a good person, bad actors out. And that's the one advantage of the scenario that Mr. Kim presented to you for settlement reasons, as opposed to letting that person stay in the business for years and years and years through appeals.
Okay, and so one of the other ones was about the instrumentality piece. And so it just seems like if you are an instrument of a state agency, just the Federal Administrative Procedures Act would flow down to you. So I'm not sure if you're able to explain
I think
that.
I am. I mean, I would leave that. I think that's a really good question for Ledge Council. But I do think that, you know, when we started the Georgia Lottery, it was the Georgia Lottery. COAM came in 2013. And I think when we started the Georgia Lottery, and the chairman can speak more to this than me, but my understanding is the thought process was to have the Georgia Lottery as an entrepreneurial corporation. They wanted the lottery to be able to make quick decisions, and to be able to make its own rules and regs to be able to provide the greatest amount of revenues. I've seen that be very beneficial if only we just talk about the iLottery platform and being able to do that. I will say that the state of Georgia does such an incredible job with the lottery. We talked about the scratcher games, we talked about the draw games, we talked about the large jackpots that we will receive over $1 billion on. We're able to make in-house decisions on games where I will say that other states don't. And when we talk about being that model, Representative Williams, that you spoke of, a lot of that comes down to that. Now, in regards to APA for COAM, we're always open. We're open to anything that we can do to make any and all improvements.
Thank you for that. And I think, would you, this is a follow-up question to that. Do you think that even if the lottery remains as this entrepreneurial agency, if you will, that within this adjudication portion, since it is an instrumentality of a state agency that is overseen by this Federal Administrative Procedures Act, could the adjudication part still be, could it still be under the Procedures Act? Just at least that piece, that way you still have the flexibility and the fluidity to operate in which you do, mainly just because of the whole judge situation and the lack of appeals and so forth. I think that part might not need to be so fluid.
Anything that can help us do things better, we're all for it. And if that's something that y'all as legislators think that would be in the best interest of the state, we leave that to y'all. But we would, of course, be willing to comply under that.
And the last question I asked you in the beginning was just, what are the initial prices for purchase? What are the average sale prices, to get an idea of those numbers?
The sales of the various settlements have been anywhere from less than 2 million to up to close to 20 million. And I think the latest one was going to blow all of those out of the water. It was going to be north of 9 figures.
But Joe, she said initially, like when someone first purchases a license, like from an auction or
just the naked auction of just a naked license is about I think the chairman had said about $3 million is kind of the current, the going rate, just for a license with no customers.
And John, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we began with the lottery having COAM, obviously, how did those licenses actually begin in 2013, John?
They were grandfathered in, and this body changed the statute to allow up to 220 licenses, and the ability for us to auction off up to that 220 number. We can do one every 3 years, or we can do all the number up to 220. And the licenses were going for about 2 million last auction each, roughly. Now, that's just a piece of paper. That would be me going in, buying a license, and as Chairman Powell pointed out, I would then have to go out and recruit locations to put my machines in. So, which is difficult the more this industry matures, because somewhat saturated in that masters already exist out there in these locations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All righty. Let's see. Mr. 27, who is that?
Right here, Mr.
Chairman
Chairman.
Jaspers.
Thank you. First, Chairman Powell, committee, I just think we all need to just recognize you and how you always keep your ear to the ground. And the folks who are in this business come to you with their questions and concerns, and I think we need to acknowledge that, because they trust you because of your past experience with all this. And because I think this is really, some of this is difficult, but it's good. But I think what I've heard everyone talk about is confidence. And how do we maintain confidence in the system with the legal team? And I guess what I was concerned about most was, during the earlier conversation, we talked about the oversight of the legal team and their work, and Attorney Kim didn't monitor them. It sounded like to me, which Chairman Powell brought up. And I know that oversight is good, and without that, it really opens them up to who knows what. I mean, favors or promises or whatever's out there. And, I just think we need to know as a committee about confidence in what they're doing and the oversight with that group. I guess that's in the form of a question.
Well, I would just say that I do have confidence in my group. I have confidence in my general counsel, and I have confidence in my senior VP of COAM. I completely hear what you're saying. I get to experience something different on a daily basis by watching, even though they report into COAM, I get to see the work that is done with all of the legal team members. And so I do hear your concern, but I experience something a little bit different. And I do take your concern seriously.
Yes, ma'am. I think it's just that. I'm just curious about the 180-something master licenses, what they're relaying their concern to Chairman Powell. Chairman Powell, if I could change the subject just a moment to gift cards. In your opinion, after looking at the gift card, what the pilot project with 80-something folks in it, what's your opinion now? Should all of them be gift cards now? Seems like it should be if the 100 not participating of the master licenses. And that documentation is our biggest concern in this committee over the last few years, has been cutting out the cash payments. Where are you at now on that?
On the cash payment pieces?
Well, just on just having everyone go to a gift card.
Think wrong and you think long.
I know. I know, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to say anything. I know I take these words seriously, and I don't want to go back on them.
I understand. Well,
I haven't, Mr. Chairman, I really have not. The reason I'm hesitating is because I want to quickly say, sure, let's do it. I truly haven't studied the data well enough to say to you that would be a really good long-term move. And I can do that for you, and I can pledge to do that for you, but I don't think I have that answer for you today.
Well, I certainly would like to know, and I got a text from master license holder that it increased their sales anywhere, depending on the site, from 10 to 35%.
Yes, sir. I do think that one thing that we talked about when we first started talking about this is we want it to be a win-win-win for everybody. We want it to be a win for the location, we want it to be a win for the master, and I've always said I don't need it to be a win for the Georgia Lottery, but I do need it to be a net neutral. Because we do recognize that Georgia Lottery product has been that COAM has been great for Georgia Lottery product. We know that if someone can redeem for product within a store or with a Georgia Lottery ticket, that they were doing so. And I just want to be a good your best representative and say to you that it would not hurt the sales if we were to go to 100%. And I think I need to do more studies for that. I will say, as I mentioned earlier today, I do recognize that our sales have increased this year during a pilot program, but I think to make a definitive statement of 100%, Chairman, if I could go back, I would love to be able to.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And I will give my observations to this, having been involved in a lot of these discussions. I've been promoting the idea of the gift card. I have. I've given the lottery the benefit of the doubt, and it's took 2 years to get something done. It should have been done in 6 months, quite frankly. It's shown that those gift cards, or most of them, are being used correctly. It is bringing in more income. Now, to understand the intricacies of this industry, this is a big money industry. And remember what I'd said, the big get bigger. Well, the bigger they get, the more likely they are to do things to keep that cash flow moving. I'm told that the master in question that I've took odds at, they were into debt $147 million their own sales to a hedge fund company. If that gives you any idea what kind of money you're talking about with these companies. And if they're in that deep, they got to continue to do whatever's necessary. That's what creates instability in this marketplace, especially to these bigger ones. When you have a small mom and pop operation that gets fined $30,000 thanks to the president. They tried to fine him $100,000 for a technical error that made absolutely no sense. That they formed an LLC for one of the brothers to advise the other brother. Wasn't connected by bank accounts, salaries, or anything else. But the arbitrary nature was they were threatened with a $100,000 fine. But yet then you have a major player who walks scot-free. This is what infuriates me about this. This is the thing that bothers me, because it creates instability in this marketplace. To answer one of the questions that you had said, and I thought the president Gretchen did a great job answering it, what the lottery was set up for. But the lottery was not set up to be handling the COAM division. This was added in 2013 as a place to tether these machines to the lottery terminals so that we knew what was going on. The purpose and the adamancy that I have about these gift cards is the number one issue, and that is to clean this industry up so that nobody is paying out cash, because that's gambling. And it takes a constitutional amendment ratified by the people of Georgia to approve that. So with a gift card, somebody is just too stupid to breathe if they get caught paying out cash illegally. And that's been my position, and it continues to be, because this industry is so important as an industry, but also as a revenue feed for the lottery. Number one highest receipts are coming in at this point from any particular game that y'all are doing. So there's the reason that I'm so adamant about this. Let's see, Mr. Collins.
Chairman Jasper's my sweet mate. He said what I wanted to say. He shined some light on that issue with internal controls and
all right.
Sunshine.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quick, I was looking at starting Lucky Bubba Bucks, but after hearing those numbers, I'm not going to be doing that now. But my question to the President is there a floor with these master licenses that you'll let them get? These people buy them, and is there a box so nobody does own them all? Is there a bottom line that y'all at least keep, 100 or 110? Is there something in your rules? That's one of my questions. The other question, for a lot of talk about oversight and attorneys, but I hadn't heard much about the lottery board and what they do to regulate that y'all go to for a lot of these issues that you're hearing the chairman talk about. I hadn't heard the board name weigh in on any of this. It seems like it's all internal, that the board's just something that's out there, and so I was just kind of curious about where's the board in all this.
I think that's a really good question. So we and I didn't go into, as I do usually, with the history of our oversight, including this including this committee, including the Economic Development Committee and the Senate, our board. We also have the COAM Advisory Board that we work with. And what we have traditionally done with our COAM Advisory Board is we've worked with them in any changes to rules and regulations. We have a COAM Advisory Board meeting within I would say 3 weeks before every board meeting. And the reason that we schedule them that way is that if we were going to do any rules and regulation changes, that we take them to the COAM Advisory Board meeting first, and then we would take them to our board.
Who picks the boards?
Our board, the Georgia Lottery, is appointed by the governor.
COAM board.
The COAM board is appointed, the members, a third by the governor, the speaker, and the lieutenant governor.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, any other questions? I want to make some final comments since we're nearing the end of some of the things that came out prompted me for even more. I've been sitting there scribbling. I can't even read my own writing. I've had so many questions. One begets another. But one of the things that I continued my concerns is that after hearing the legal counsel speak, and that's about oversight. And I know you do a great job. You got your hands full. But in these divisions, especially in the COAM division, I'm trying to think the question I really want to ask about oversight. But if he has no oversight, and you're busy, quite frankly, as the president, with so many other multitude of things, as good a job as you do with that, there's got to be some sort of oversight. I remember a case that was brought to the Revenue Department a few years ago about certain things that were terrible about what happens in government agencies. And this happened over at the Revenue Department, where they were manipulating tax records and they were selling and doing and whatever. And some of us on the inside understand those questions, even though they've been buried and still supposed to be coming back alive at the AG's behest. And I'm trying to think the question I want to ask, but there's got to be some kind of internal controls. The personnel that are making the decisions. Has there been a background check? Is there any conflicts of interest? Do they have any relationships with the COAM operators or their employees or the attorneys that represent them? Do you know of that? Is there any of that that's available? Or maybe Mr. Heine maybe I need to ask him as the director. Specifically, if I might, do you know of any conflicts of interest that any of your employees and decision makers, that they would have any conflicts of interest, relationships, family members, friends, associates with these COAM master licensees?
Absolutely not.
None at all?
No, sir.
Very good. Very good.
And the oversight question, if I could just touch on that, because I feel a little attacked here. And it's like Ms. Corbin said, there's no decision made in a vacuum. We're a small team. We work together. There's nothing that we do that Joe Kim does not know about, or Ms. Corbin for that matter. She is, I try to keep her out of the weeds, but unfortunately, because of the nature of the industry, she gets pulled into the weeds. So I really don't want this committee to walk away thinking that there are decisions made in some secret back room at our headquarters.
Do you have any way of assuring, do y'all have any internal security that you know that the people that work in your division, do y'all monitor their texts, their emails, anything on the official phones to know that they're not in collusion or doing things for favors or anything like that?
I would say no, we don't consistently monitor everyone's emails or texts.
None of your senior staff have any relationship that you know of, such as family members that are COAM operators? Or
no, sir.
Relationships of former college roommates?
Absolutely not.
All right.
No.
No family members have called on attorneys for any of these folks to represent them in any legal defense?
Repeat that question again. I'm sorry.
Do you have any of your staff that might at some point have asked for help from, say, a COAM or an attorney for a COAM to help them or a family member with anything?
Not real sure what you're asking. I mean, the only thing I can
I'm
say is
asking for internal security to know. I know that you can have all the confidence in the world and you can trust all, but you have to verify. Do you have any of your staff that you know of that their family members have ever had to call on a COAM or an employee or a professional representing a COAM to help them in any legal defense or anything else?
I can tell you there's been no impropriety, and when there is an accusation of that, which has come from a couple directions, we investigate it, look at it internally as a group, and go to the end. And there has been no impropriety from our findings on anything, any allegation. There's always going to be allegations in this industry of you're crooked. You're not. If they don't get the right answer or the answer that makes them happy, there's always going to be finger pointing. There's finger pointing throughout this industry with operators, with each other. So
y'all have looked at sworn depositions where certain statements were made in sworn depositions?
yes, sir, we have.
All right, very good. All right, number 22.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to be very brief for you, sir. I'm sorry that you feel like you are being attacked, but as an oversight committee, there's no way in the world to find out what's what without asking you a question. And having run a few businesses myself, you know, when I talk to folk who are responsible to me, you know, it was not attacking them. I attacked them when I showed them the door. You see, that's the only time I attack. And I don't want you to feel that way, because we're elected to do what I hope we're doing. And I don't think it's the case here, but far too often in my 20 years plus, we spend too much time with kid gloves on instead of asking the hard questions that folk need to hear and deserve to hear the answer. It's not an attack. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Very good. That would be Ms. Maynard.
Just kind of to clarify what Chair said, what about, are there any conflict of interest forms that you guys, is that kind of part of the mandatory?
We do. We have some HR conflict of interest forms, and I apologize, I don't know all of them at this point in time, but I think that we could let you know of those. I also do think that we could probably amp some up. I think that those are some really good suggestions. So I'll go back and look and see which ones. For instance, at the lottery, we have things in regards to, you know, vendors and those relationships, and and what we can and cannot do, and we have those to the same extent with COAM. But could they be deeper at this point in time as this industry has continued to grow and change? I think so.
All right. Well, I thank God the lightning bugs have gone off my board. I just want to make a few closing comments to the president that I have an immense amount of respect for. I have spoken in the past, and I continue about my concerns about an industry. I speak about my concerns for an out-of-control bureaucracy that may not always be monitored. When I say trust but verify, as my friend Chairman Jaspers had said, I hear from all of these folks, the big ones, the little ones. That's the reason it's so hard to get done, to get anything passed, because all the big ones have their own lobbying staff. They're down here trying to kill anything because they want what they want, and to hell with everything else. Do you think that y'all need, your COAM division needs to be under the Administrative Procedures Act? Do you think that would be helpful?
I don't know the Administrative Procedures Act well enough to answer that question. I don't. This is what I will say. Anything that you could help us tighten up, and that we could work with you in the Senate to make stronger, to regulate this industry in a proper way, yes, sir.
So I take it you do think that so, because that's pretty common, the Administrative Procedures
Yes, sir.
Act.
Without knowing every little line of it, yes, sir.
Especially so that the House and Senate oversight would have oversight into the rulemaking process.
Sure.
So we could. have a
We
sight
are,
of that.
we are very comfortable with that. I think that probably what we are least comfortable with is when the discretion that we do have. We want to do what the legislature intended to be done, and so any way that you can help us in our attempt to do so, we are all for it, Mr. Chairman.
Given some of the more recent events, do you think that it would be probably proper to codify that any assets of any company that has infringed should be auctioned as opposed to allow private transfers or deals?
I think to allow for it, I think that definitely both would be very helpful. Kind of speaking to the advantages of when you are able to sell quickly and get a bad actor out, I think there's some advantages there. But I do see where to be able to auction it would be beneficial as well.
All right. Now, do you think that in your organization, because it's common that in corporate organizations, the legal overview is placed in the hands of the legal officer, in this case, Mr. Kim. And as I'd listened, and it gave me great amount of concern to hear that he didn't have oversight to the others. Should that not be corrected to give him oversight? Not just when it's convenient, if that makes any sense.
It does. I think that was a good suggestion.
Is that something y'all might need to do, or is that something that, I mean, we can't put everything in code, and nor do I think we need to, but
I think it is absolutely something I will go back and look at and report to you in a week, if that's okay.
if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
To the members of the committee, y'all have heard 2 hours of pretty good testimony, and this is what being an oversight committee is. It's not a pleasant process. Sometimes as they thought it might felt like you were being attacked. Well, you're a government employee, quite frankly. You work for the people of Georgia no matter who you are. That's the reason we do have oversight. Because when there's no oversight, then the government is in full control and can be as abusive as it wants to. And I can tell you nothing comes of that. So to the committee members, I want to thank you for today. I want to charge you to run these hearings through your mind. Make your recommendations. Other questions you got? President Corbin, I've never known her to be anything more than available to this committee when we've asked. So if y'all would, put those questions out. Funnel them through my office. We'll send them to her, whatever questions that you've got, so that we can get some other answers if you have any other questions. That being said, any of the members have anything to say? If you'll meet me in my office, I will give you your fraternity pin for the honor of serving on regulated industries as Mr. Williams, as Ms. Maynor, Ms. Hutchinson, and who is Mr. Dubnik's not here. Jan, mark him down for his first missed meeting. Second one. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your diligence today of being here, and this committee will reassemble next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Gretchen.
Chairman. My pleasure. Thank you.